Hi everyone. Believe it or not, this is going to be our last lecture for the course. And I hope everything is going well and I hope you guys are finding this useful. I'm still grading. Don't forget though, if you have any missing assignments, please turn them in before the class ends, okay? So remember, if you turn it in, you do it, you get credit. Okay, so just make sure you do complete the assignments because the whole purpose is for them to benefit you and for you to learn from them by applying it to a class that's giving you difficulty. So this is going to be our last lecture because next week I want you guys to focus on a presentation. You guys don't have to give the presentation, of course, but you're just going to create one and then upload it in the course, and then ideally you're going to pick a topic that is giving you difficulty. Okay, if you have any questions, once again, I'll be in my office this week. Please send me an email. I'll be more than happy to meet with you. And please don't forget to fill in the course evaluation at the end of the term. I definitely want to know how to improve this class, what you found useful, what you didn't find useful, all sorts of other good stuff. So this week we're going to be focusing on sleep, okay, and why this is important when it comes to memory and studying. So before we start anything with regards to this lecture, of course, we first have to define sleep. So in your opinion, how would you define sleep? Okay, so this is something that we all have to have, and of course, if we don't have sleep, ultimately things will end miserably. And so the first thing to go is your cognition and your emotional stability and all sorts of other good stuff if you don't get enough sleep. But I cannot tell you how important it is to get enough sleep when it comes to memory and remembering things and studying. So basically, if we're going to define what sleep is, it's basically a condition of body and mind that typically reoccurs for several hours every night, and the nervous system is relatively inactive, the eyes are closed, the posture muscles are relaxed, and basically consciousness is suspended. What you may not know, though, is that we have many different stages of sleep. Okay, and so let's talk about the stages of sleep and why they're important to us and for our survival. So the first stage is light sleep. Okay, and so in this stage you tend to drift in and out, your eyes move slowly, your muscle activity is slow, and you're easy to wake up at this particular stage. The second stage, your body starts to prepare for deep sleep. Eye movements and brain waves slow down, your body temperature drops, and your heart rate slows down. Okay? Once you get to the third stage, you're now in deep sleep. You have extremely slow brain waves called the delta waves, and these are intermixed with smaller, faster brain waves. And then in stage 4, you stay in deep sleep. Okay, and your brain is almost exclusively produces the slow delta waves, guiding you towards the fifth stage. The last couple of stages, the last fifth stage, is called REM sleep. Now your eyes are closed. They move rapidly side to side due to intense dream and brain activity you're going through at this stage. So think about it as you're going to sleep, okay, and when you actually wake up and when you don't. And also consider what happens to you when you don't get enough sleep and how this might inhibit your ability to learn. So I liked this diagram and I thought it did a nice job to kind of show what was going on in the different stages, okay? So the way they measure this, by the way, are putting monitors on your head, and so they can measure the brain waves as far as what's going on. Now, just to share a little side story, just because I think it keeps it interesting, my daughter loved to volunteer to be a guinea pig for different studies. And because she was always interested in research, and of course she likes money because she's, you know, like her stepmother. So I'll never forget that she had volunteered to do a sleep study, in which case they put monitors on her head and then they were going to record her sleep patterns for a night. And so her dad went with her for the first night because she was a minor, and so we each had to go with her. Someone always had to accompany her when she was going to the sleep labs. And so her dad went with her the first night. Everything was great, no problem. Everything was fine. So I go with her the second night and I watch them hook her up. And of course, being the scientist, I'm fascinated as they're putting these probes all over her head and everything else. And you know, she's sitting there patiently waiting, and they get everything all wired up, and then they have her, you know, they put me into a bedroom to the side so I can be there in case something goes wrong. But there's a door that shuts in between, and then she was out in the lab with the nurses and so forth, and they were going to monitor her sleeping patterns. Well, I had a great sleep, I got to be honest. The bed was incredibly soft, the pillows were super comfortable, and the room was incredibly dark. I just thought it was lovely, but I get up the next morning and she just looks at me. And as soon as I walk out, and my daughter says to me, "You kept us all up with your snoring. Nobody got any sleep and you ruined all their data." for the night. And so at first I thought she might be exaggerating. I thought, oh, yeah, whatever. So my daughter is a drama queen. So I was nice to everybody, but everybody did kind of look a little bit grumpy. And so, they still were very polite to me, of course. And so then I took her home and, she was grumpy with me because I had ruined their data. And I definitely, I'm sure that I did interfered with her sleep. But apparently she wasn't exaggerating. And the people who were head of the sleep lab had called my husband to ask that he accompany her the next time because I guess I really did keep everybody up. And they had 5 or 6 people in there they were collecting data on, but apparently I was snoring so loudly that I just kept everybody up the whole night. Oops. But anyway, so this particular diagram does a nice job to show, a sleep cycle with all of the different stages. Or stage 1, where you're light sleep and you start, breathing slows down. Stage 2, heart rate slows down as well. You decrease in body temperature. Stage 3, you begin deep sleep and the brain starts to get slow into delta waves. In stage 4, you get a much more brainwave activity, and then you get your REM sleep at stage 5. And what researchers do know is that it's very important for you to get adequate sleep to function, because if you don't, then you're going to have issues with regards to memory and functioning and emotional stability. So think about the last time where you stayed up all night. Not that anybody here would do that to cram for an exam. But think about the last time you stayed up all night. What was the first thing that kind of went to the wayside? Probably your memory and your emotional stability. Well, that's what happens when you don't get enough sleep. So, big hint, the night before the exam, go to bed, okay? Get a good night's sleep, and that will help you more than cramming up the night before ever will. Okay, so the next thing I want us to talk about is making memories, because this is really important when you're studying and you're trying to learn new material, okay? So remember, there are many different types of memory. Some are based on fact, and some are episodic, based on events in your life, and some are procedural, okay? For something to make a memory, 3 functions must occur: acquisition, consolidation, and recall. Both acquisition and recall are functions that take place when you're awake, but researchers believe very strongly that sleep is required for consolidation, okay? And it doesn't matter what memory type it is. Without adequate sleep, your brain cannot absorb and recall new information. This is crucial. Sleep does more than just help sharpen the mind. Sleep affects physical reflexes like fine motor skills and judgment. One study showed that participants who were sleep deprived were more likely to think they were right when in fact they were wrong. Maybe when you're taking an exam and you're looking over potential answers, okay? Studies involving memory tests show that after a single night of sleep or even a nap, people perform better, whether on a test, in the office, or on a athletic field, or a concert hall. Hey, I think we should all get to take naps. I would have no problem with that, but I can tell you that naps can be very useful, especially if you've not had adequate sleep, okay? So don't underestimate the power of a good night's sleep and potentially taking a nap. Just don't sleep through the exam. I've heard of stories like that too. Researchers continue to investigate the stages of sleep, okay, and they don't know exactly how it enhances memory, but it seems to involve the hippocampus and the neocortex. This is where long-term memories are stored, okay? So think about that. That's where you want your information to go when you're trying to recall it for an exam. So it's thought that during sleep, the hippocampus replays the events of the day for the neocortex when it reviews and processes memories, and this is what helps to shove them in the long term. So certain kinds of memories become stable during the REM sleep. This is when you're dreaming. Other studies have found that some types of memories are most often secured during slow wave deep sleep. So doing research when you don't have someone who's keeping everybody up allows scientists to understand what sleep does do to our brain, and there's a lot of unanswered questions. Okay, so what we do know is that sleep is a necessity. We need it to survive. Okay, and it seems though that not enough of us are getting an adequate sleep to really function our best. Experts recommend that adults, this is you guys, get 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night. Okay, so even though this might not be attainable, this should still be your goal. So when it comes to sleep and memory, Okay, healthy sleep is essential for optimal learning and memory function. We know this through research. Sleep, learning, and memory are not completely understood. We know that sleep helps learning and memory, though, through two ways. We know that a sleep deprived person can't focus their attention very well, therefore, they can't learn. We also know that sleep, it has the role of consolidation in memory, and this is what you must have when you're learning new information. Okay, so sleep, learning, and memory are complex phenomena. Okay, so remember that. However, remember consolidation is incredibly important when it comes to recall, and this is when you're trying to recall the information, especially during an exam. Okay, so each of the steps is necessary for proper memory function. Acquisition and recall, again, only happen during wakefulness. However, consolidation only happens during when we're sleeping. There's no consensus about how sleep makes this possible. However, researchers think that brain waves during different stages of sleep are associated with forming particular types of memory. So what does this mean? It means that you should definitely get an adequate amount of sleep before you take your exam, particularly when you're trying to study and learn the new information. So I got to tell you, this is one of my favorite findings with regards to research and sleep. And part of it is because I definitely remember times when I've not slept well, and it completely makes sense to me. So, a new mouse study suggests that sleep helps to restore the brain by flushing out toxins that build up during waking hours. Okay. And so, I don't know if you've noticed, but if you have a night where you stay up all night, all right, and then you're trying to function the next day, you feel like you have maybe consumed a bit too much alcohol, okay, the night before, when in fact you haven't consumed any. Well, what is alcohol? It's toxins, okay, that build up in your brain. And so if you don't get enough sleep, you get toxins built up into your brain, and your body is not able to actually flush it out and clean it the way it's supposed to. That's why researchers think that we tend to feel that way when we've got enough sleep. Okay, so this was recently discovered at the University of Rochester Medical Center. So there's a system that drains the waste products from the brain, okay, which is managed by the brain's glial cells. And so they reported that the system will help remove a toxin protein called beta amyloid from brain tissue. This will accumulate in the brains of patients with Alzheimer's disease, and it's famous for that. Okay, so sleeping is what allows this to be removed. Other research has shown that brain levels of this decreases during sleep. And so what they're thinking now is that sleep might affect the beta amyloid clearance by regulating that particular system. How cool is that? I mean, seriously, to understand why we feel so horrible when we don't get enough sleep and it turns out it's just the buildup of a protein. To me, that's absolutely fascinating and so cool. So I also wanted to share some information with you that there really isn't a clear definition of exactly how long someone must go without sleep or how little sleep a person has to be considered sleep deprived. We do know that different people need different amounts of sleep. I can tell you I need a lot of sleep. And that's only gotten more prevalent as I've gotten older. There is no definition universal for sleep deprivation. However, if you get less sleep than you need to feel awake and alert, then you're sleep deprived. Okay. Researchers have found, though, that people can be physically and psychologically damaged by not getting enough sleep. Okay, and they're finding this based on research from the University of Pennsylvania. So it definitely, in the long run, benefits you to get an adequate amount of sleep for your health as well as everything else. Another piece of information that I find pretty fascinating is that if you have even as little as a single night of sleep deprivation, you can have a phenomenon called microsleeps, okay, the next day. That's when it's basically a mini snooze session, which can be up to 30 seconds. And what's happening is that your eyes are open, but your brain is not functioning. Okay, and so you're not processing information. So think of the last time you stayed up all night studying for an exam and you went to lecture and you remember nothing about what you what you heard. Okay, so the studies have shown that during microsleeps, the brain goes into a sleep state and it's uncontrollable. People can force themselves awake, but they'll fall asleep again in another microsleep. And so this condition can be very dangerous, especially if you're driving or if you're behind the wheel. So let's say you have a night of no sleep, okay, and then generally you say you feel loopy, okay. This may eventually cause a condition called delirium. True delirium happens when a person becomes really disoriented, and sleep can play a role in that. Okay, so people who've been hospitalized in intensive care units where lights and sounds might continue all day develop what's called ICU delirium, and it's unclear if deprivation is the cause of this. However, the loss of sleep is one reason that people will stay in the hospital for extended periods of time and they start developing weird behavior. Okay, the worst thing you can do for sleep is put someone in a hospital, which is really ironic. It's fairly common for hospitalized patients to develop insomnia, unfortunately. So just something to keep in the back of your mind. When you have what's called chronic sleep deprivation, okay, believe it or not, you can get what are called hallucinations. And so, technically, whether or not sleep deprivation can induce true ones or not is up to debate. However, this does seem to be a side effect of not getting enough sleep for a long period of time. So also please remember that the next time you guys are cramming for too many assignments. Not that anybody would do that here. So should actually make sense based on what we've talked about so far. So if a person is deprived of sleep, this can lead to tremendous emotional problems. And the reason is because one of the first things to go is your emotional stability when you've not had enough sleep. And sadly, unfortunately, we've known for a while that sleep deprivation has been used as a form of torture. Okay, so what does this tell you about getting enough sleep? It tells you that you should definitely do your best to try and make sure you do get enough sleep so everything is functioning the way it's supposed to. So let's tie all this back to learning and performance, okay, and why it's so incredibly important when it comes to studying and learning material for an exam. Sleep deprivation leads to issues with focus, attention, and vigilance, okay? And then we drift off. You can't receive information as well, and your neurons can't coordinate information properly. And so interpretation of events is also impacted by sleep. All of this is so incredibly important when it comes to, trying to learn information and to be able to function really, really at your best for an exam. So, in addition to just talking about what's going on, in general, I like telling you guys what's going on with regards to research, okay? And so, this is really interesting area of research. Something I'd like you all to be aware of is a condition called fatal familial insomnia, okay, or otherwise known as FFI. This is an inherited prion disease. So I don't know if you're familiar or not with prions, but prions are basically smaller than proteins, smaller than viruses. Researchers are still trying to figure out exactly how to classify prions, but it affects the thalamus, okay? And the thalamus is part of the brain that controls the sleep-wake cycle, and this is the relay center of the brain, and it's incredibly important. Like other prion diseases, it's a progressive neurodegenerative disease, which means that over time there's fewer neurons. Loss of neurons in the thalamus causes symptoms of this. So what this means is you get progressive insomnia. How awful would that be? Okay, to not be able to actually sleep. So you're basically stuck awake all of the time. Okay, so the first symptoms of people who have this genetic disease begin midlife, and you get progressive insomnia, eventually weight loss, lack of appetite, your body temperature is not regulated, and you get dementia. Okay, almost all the cases are caused by certain changes in this particular gene, and it's autosomal dominant, meaning you only need one copy of it to get it. There are a small number of sporadic cases, but the really sad part of this is there's no treatments, okay? And there's no treatments and no cure, and once you start showing symptoms, you usually die within 12 to 18 months of the first symptoms. Can you imagine how awful it would be not to sleep? Oh my goodness, that would be terrible. I also wanted to share with you some information with regard to the prion disease based on a couple that are incredibly interesting and absolutely fascinating. So these two individuals, they're a married couple. They had two different careers when they discovered that the wife, and I'm sorry, I can't remember her name. We could probably definitely look it up if you guys want me to. However, her mother was diagnosed with this disease, and so she started to recognize it and then started to go through those effects, and eventually her mother passed away from it because as she watched her mom deteriorate, she couldn't sleep. Okay, so her mom was unable to sleep. her mom started to suffer the physical ailments that come with lack of sleep, and eventually she passed away. So once they found out that it was autosomal dominant, the wife was then tested for this disease, and they found out that she had it. Okay, and the disturbing part, as you can see here, she was pregnant with her child. So she knew she had this disease, eventually would show the same symptoms as other people in the family. There's a really fascinating special on these guys. I think, I forget which, this was an NPR that this particular story was, but they've been covered in other places too. And so that they were talking about this couple, and they're so amazing because of the fact that they both changed careers. They went back to school at Harvard to get PhDs so they could study this disease and try to save her before the symptoms kick in. So people who work with them at Harvard say they're the most amazing couple. They're not in it for at all for the, glory or any of that. They're trying to work as hard as they can to find a cure for the disease so she can live. I mean, how sad and amazing as that is, just to dedicate your life. And her husband, she and her husband, both went back to school. They're both PhD students, and they're probably, if they're not finished now, they're definitely close to being finished with regards to their degrees. And I keep meaning to check up on them to see, where things stand for them right now. I don't know that they have found a cure yet, but to me, they just seem to be absolutely amazing. So this was actually all I had for our lectures this week. I hope you guys found this interesting, and I hope that I emphasized to you how important it is that you get a good night's sleep before you take an exam. Okay, so if you have to cram 2 nights before or 3 nights before, okay, and make sure you get that adequate amount of sleep so when you actually take the test, you're ready to go. So if you have any questions this week, please let me know. I would love to have you all check in with me. Okay, I want to know how things are going for you and how I can help. Please also fill out the, once the course evaluations come online, if you guys could fill out the course evaluation for this class. I want to know how to improve this and give you guys the best experience. Okay, and then I think I will end up having a small lecture next week just so I can give you some instructions and directions on your presentation. Okay, so, I wish you a wonderful week, and please do check in with me as soon as you can. I'd love to hear from you and hear how things are going. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.